Welcome to Xamarin University. My name is Chris van Wyk, and this is Salesforce Concepts and Architecture, Enterprise 301. This course gives an overview of Salesforce for people with little to no previous experience. If you already have a Salesforce environment and know how to create a Salesforce connected app, then you do not need to attend this course. The goal here is to prepare your online Salesforce environment to allow an external app to connect and access your data. There is no code in this course. It gets things ready for you to write an app in a future class. We're going to explain the basic Salesforce concepts and terminology, and then walk you through signing up for a Salesforce free account. We'll then show you how to customize Salesforce to handle your company's data and authorize an external application to access said data. By the end of this course, you'll be able to do all the server-side tasks an app developer would need to do, and your data will be ready and your external code will be authorized to connect. You will have done everything except write the external application. Before we continue, I would like to make sure that you were able to download the resources for today's course. If you were able to do so, you should see the all familiar start your HTML file, and I have that open here on my screen. We're going to need a web browser and an internet connection to complete the exercises that we have for this course. There is no coding. And as I've mentioned, we're going to have an overview look at Salesforce and the developer environment. To do so, we have 3 exercises, and we're going to register for a developer account, create a custom object, and create a connected application. The slide deck for today is available as a PDF, which you are able to print out. Please notice though that we have a copyright page as the second page of the PDF. I would like to highlight the additional resources that we have for this course as well. A few items that's really important from this section is using OAuth to authorize external applications, and the reference links to standard objects and system fields. These concepts will be discussed as part of the course, but it's good to know where to go and have a look at them for additional information. So at this point, let's return back to our slide deck and have a look at registration. Salesforce has a lot of terminology and some of it is non-standard, so we need to go over some basic definitions to get us started. After that, we'll sign up for a Salesforce account and see the concepts working live online. We will register for a Salesforce account and then log in and explore the sample data that is part of the Salesforce web interface prepared for us. Salesforce is known for its customer relationship management software, or CRM software. That is software focused on sales support, for instance, tracking customers, managing leads, catching up on orders, or just managing products. Each and every touch point that I may have as a company with my customer. They also offer many other products, for example, support or help desk management software to manage marketing campaigns, or just collaboration tools for teams that needs to man these endpoints. The key thing to keep in mind is that Salesforce offers a software as a service product, so all products are hosted in the cloud. Salesforce is large and complex. However, at its core, you can think of it as a cloud-hosted database. Most other Salesforce features are built on top of this data. For instance, record creation or record editing, dashboard views, or even workshop relationships. So with that in mind, let's have our first flash quiz. And the question here is, what would you call these highlighted items in the diagram? Now, it wouldn't surprise me if you were to name these tables. What we need to keep in mind, though, is that Salesforce has its own terminology, and these tables gets classified as objects. Salesforce tries to minimize the setup time for a new customer, so they create lots of tables or objects automatically when you create your account. This lets even a non-expert start using the system right away without any need to understand how objects are created or managed. There are roughly 350 standard objects available. However, this slide only lists those items that are most intuitive if you're a first-time user looking at these objects. Even with all the standard objects that gets presented to us, it is impossible to cover all data scenario requirements for companies. Businesses typically have domain-specific data that they will need to store, and Salesforce has a user-friendly web interface to let you define custom tables to store such data. So for instance, if I need to store a table or object that contains song information, I can create my own object and then specify the layout of this table. Both the standard object and your custom objects get several fields automatically when they are created, and these fields are called system fields. System fields provide a unique ID and support for modification tracking. For example, the ID serves as the table's primary key and uniquely identifies a record. The created by ID, created date, last modified ID, and last modified date are used for auditing purposes. There are two other fields as well, which is deleted and system modified stamp. Now these fields are all read-only because they are managed for you. So for example, the ID is set automatically when a record is created, and last modified date is set when a record is changed. Keep in mind, system fields are available in most objects. However, technically they are not guaranteed to be present in every object. In particular, not all the standard objects have the audit fields. So far we've mentioned standard objects, custom objects, and system fields. But how do we manage this? Well, we do this by using the Salesforce web interface. The Salesforce web interface is quite extensive and it can be confusing, but it allows us a way to manage the structure of our data, that is, creating custom objects and custom fields. We can create custom ways to view the data, so we'll be able to set up dashboards, and we can create applications to structure these dashboards in a way that makes sense to our users. This will allow us to create, edit, and delete our data as record sets. And after we've created an account, we'll take a few minutes to explore the web UI in more detail. Before we move on to applications and apps, let's define what a Salesforce app is. As a mobile developer, we think of an app as software running on a device. Salesforce used the term app to mean a combination of user interface and data all running inside the Salesforce cloud. The concept of app is important to understand because it's going to help us navigate the Salesforce web interface as well as explain two of the key UI elements, the app menu in the header and the tabs across the main content area. Salesforce's definition of an app is as follows. It is short for application, a collection of components such as tabs, reports, dashboards, and Visualforce pages that address specific business needs. So it is a domain-specific term that is or has context in the Salesforce environment. So what is an environment? Your instance of Salesforce is called your environment. It contains all your data, all your apps, and all your company's users. The term environment or organization and even org are all synonymous. And these terms appear in the sign-up process and through other documentation, so it is useful to have at least a basic understanding of what that means. We also get three types of environments. The first type is a production with live data and users. The second one is development containing data or applications under development, and then a test environment with real-world data that is set for testing but isolated from production. And your company will likely have more than one environment that you may have access to. In this course, we're going to make use of the Salesforce Developer Edition environment. Now, Salesforce offers the Developer Edition environment to let you try out Salesforce for free. There are, however, a few limitations. For instance, we only have 5 megs of data storage, 20 meg of file storage, that means attachments, 5,000 API calls per 24 hours, 500 meg of bandwidth, and 10-minute service request time limits per rolling 24 hours. We can, however, create any number of applications. Even with all the limitations, a developer environment gives you everything you need to start testing your code. It comes with all the standard objects, and many of them are pre-populated with sample data. Now, in our next step, we're going to sign up for an account. But I would like you to keep the following in mind. The email address used to register becomes your username, and it is difficult to change your username or even delete an account once created. So if you want to avoid using your primary email address, because that is going to be used in your organization's Salesforce instance already, I would suggest creating a secondary email address and then use it to register for your developer account. In our first exercise for today, we're going to register for a Salesforce Developer account, and we're going to explore the UI that gets presented to us once we've logged in. Now, as per always, our exercise instructions is available in our start here HTML file, and I would like you to follow me to my browser where I've opened up that file. So you'll notice that this first exercise is to register for a developer account, so I'm going to open that up. And one of our steps in here is to set and go to the registration page. So what I'm going to do is open this up in a new tab, because I'm going to come back to this page to complete the rest of the exercise. Now, this page that's presented is going to require me to fill in a bit of personal information, choose an email address, and use that email address as my username as well. So remember what I mentioned earlier. If you already have a primary address that's going to allow you to sign into an existing Salesforce environment, you probably want to use a secondary email address. Once you've completed this information, click on the I've read and agree to the master subscription agreement, then tap on the Sign Me Up button. If all information is correct, you will then receive a confirmation that a confirmation email is on its way to your email address. I'm going to assume you've done that and you've already received your confirmation email. So let's go back and see what we need to do in the second part of this exercise. Now that we have registered for an account, it's time to log into our environment. To do this, I'm going to open up this link provided in our exercise, specify my username, and then provide my login. After login, you should be on this setup page. This page contains the main navigation links in the left-hand column, these items here, and it also provides us access to any other application that forms part of our environment. So for instance, this right-hand top side drop-down is going to specify the different applications available. For instance, if I tap on call center, it is going to take me to the call center application. You can see how the tabs change to give me different views on my data. Let's go back to our sales application. You'll notice as I switch back to sales that I don't see my setup page. So the anchor that I have in Salesforce has now sort of disappeared. To get it back, you'll tap on this setup link and it'll give us back this page. So as developers, we'll spend a lot of time in here customizing our environment. But as we play around with data and we query it, we'd probably want to see what our data looks like. So what we could do is, let's say we want to see what is inside our accounts object. I could tap on the accounts tab and it will give me the option to view all records. From here, I would be able to edit a record, change some data, or even delete it if it was required. So let's just do a modification and save that information. Now there's a lot more to this UI than what we can have a look at in a few minutes. So I'd advise you to play around with the data and then explore it on your own time. But keep in mind, if you want to get back to your anchor point, just select setup. So at this stage, I'm going to go back to our course material and then we'll revisit this page in a few minutes. We now have a Salesforce environment ready to use with some sample tables and sample data, and we know how to navigate through the main pages of the Salesforce web interface. As a developer, you will need to work with your data online. For example, compare the data you see online against the query results you get from your mobile application. So it's quite important to understand how to navigate and then also get back to your anchor point, the setup page. So let's move on and look at how we can customize our data. Standard objects work well for learning and testing. However, once you start using Salesforce to run your business, you will likely need to create custom objects for your custom data. And in this section, we're going to explore this option. Here we will create a custom object with a custom field, and we'll also define our organization's namespace to give our object a unique identity inside Salesforce. This is needed if you later access your object programmatically, so we're going to have a look at how these elements impact on each other. As you can imagine, nearly every business will have data that doesn't fit into any of the standard objects. And for those instances, we can create custom objects inside Salesforce and then tailor them to our data. Keep in mind though that it is possible to modify the standard objects. For example, let's say you need another field on the accounts object, you would be able to add that. But before we can do this, we need to specify a namespace. Each organization registers a unique namespace prefix. Salesforce checks to make sure that your preferred namespace isn't already used before you can register. So this is a registration across Salesforce. You cannot change your namespace after creation, so you should consider carefully before registering a namespace for production use. Also keep in mind that your prefix will appear as part of the API names for your custom objects and column fields, so it will be something that is visible to client developers. So how do we register a namespace? Namespace registration is a one-time process performed using the Salesforce web interface. And typically this is done shortly after creating an account. So this will be one of the steps that we're going to follow in our next exercise. We're going to go to Setup, Build, Create, Packages, and then edit our developer settings. And here we'll be able to provide a prefix. Once we've registered the prefix, we'll then be able to continue creating custom objects. Now that we have our namespace set, we can create custom objects. And we're going to define a new database table in essence. Salesforce gives you many options to choose from during the creation process. For instance, we're going to need to set the table name, and then we'll need to provide a label that is going to be used in the Salesforce web interface for this object. We'll also be able to fine-tune a lot of parameters for our table using various metadata. For instance, we'd be able to set if this table would allow bulk access, or whether it should stay private for a while or be deployed immediately. Custom objects automatically get a copy of the standard fields, so we'll get ID, last modified, etc. Remember that the ID field provides an identifier for a row that is unique across our Salesforce instance. Custom objects also get a name field. The name field is created automatically for all custom objects. It typically functions as a unique ID within the table. So this is different than the ID, which is unique across all of Salesforce. For the name field, you get to choose text or auto number for the type. If you choose text, then name usually serves as a human readable way of identifying a record. If you choose auto number as the type, then name usually works as an ID that is unique within the table. And you can even include a prefix in front of this auto number. So the names for a purchase order could be, for instance, PO 0511. So how do we create these custom objects? To create a custom object, we're going to make use of the Salesforce web interface, which has this really user-friendly page to let you create a custom object. And you'll notice here on the slide all the metadata that we can set. For instance, the label and plural label are descriptive names that are used for display in the web interface. The object name is the formal name of this table and is used in API calls. The record name is a description name for the name field. The record name will be used in the web interface, while name is used in API calls. Now, once we've created our custom objects, we're going to need to specify fields. Now, fields you can see as columns inside a database table. The Salesforce web interface has a user-friendly sequence of pages to let you create a custom field. There are many configuration options available, but only a few that are required. For instance, data type, field label, and field name. Some data types will have additional requirements. For instance, if I were to specify a text field, I will be required to specify the maximum length for this field. The field label is for humans to read and used in a web interface, whereas the field name is used to programmatically access the field via an API call. What's interesting to note about these field names are that they will be used with a namespace prefix added to the front of the field name and then a __c added to the end. This means that the names you choose for your custom objects and custom fields are not used by themselves in API calls. To ensure uniqueness and to distinguish them from standard objects and system fields, your names are combined with your namespace prefix and the __c suffix. So typically, when we query our objects, we could have a command that looks like this on screen. It is now time for our first individual exercise, and in this exercise, we're going to create a custom Salesforce object so that we can save custom company data in Salesforce. And I would like you to follow me back to our start here HTML file so that we can have a look at this exercise in detail. Right, let's have a look at exercise number 2, creating a custom object. So the goal for this exercise is to register a custom namespace prefix to give our custom objects a unique identifier within Salesforce. And after that, we're going to create a new custom object. So we're going to create a custom table with a custom field. At the end of this exercise, you'll have everything you need to know to write queries against your custom object. You'll know the namespace prefix, the object name, and the field name. Now the steps are all listed inside this page, and you are welcome to complete this exercise and then switch back to continue with the training. Right, let's have a look at the result of this exercise, and I would like you to follow me back to the Salesforce web interface. Once you're logged back into Salesforce, you want to make sure that you are able to see the setup section like I have here on my screen. If you are lost at any point in time, make sure to tap on the setup link and it'll bring you back to this page. Right, so our first step in our exercise was to set the namespace for our instance. To do this, you're going to navigate to Build, Create, and then within Create, you're going to select the Packages option. Once selected, you should see the developer settings for your environment. So here I have set a namespace and I've used a reverse DNS namespace naming so that I know that my instance is going to be unique based on that DNS name. In the second part of the exercise, we had to set up a custom object. So to get to custom objects, we're going to go to Build, Create, and select Objects. Now my custom object's already created, but I would be able to edit this object, which is called Song, by tapping on the Edit button there. This will then list my song's metadata, and I would be able to change any of the options available. I'm however not going to change this, but what I'd like to show you is if you check out the data type, we could set this to autonumber, and then it would provide us with an option to set the display format as well as the starting number. So in our exercise or example where we mentioned a purchase order, this is exactly where you're going to set that up. Also note the optional features that are available. Now this custom object has a custom field. So let's click on the song label. And you'll note all the information about this object. For instance, the label name, the plural name, the object name, the namespace prefix, as well as the API name. Note how the API name is constructed with the prefix and the suffix. The field that we created in this object is called title. So let's have a look at its details. Here we can see the field label, the name, again our namespace prefix, the API name, note how this is designated with the prefix and the suffix. And then we'll see the general options that we have set on this field. I'm going to click on Edit because I want to show you where we could have set additional information on this field. So we could set some constraints, for instance, it's required or unique, or I can change the length for this text field. To summarize, in this objective, we looked at how to store your company-specific data in Salesforce, and we also saw the naming pattern used in API calls to access your custom data. Now, this will all be important when you start writing code. So let's move to creating a connected app. Salesforce only allows known apps to connect to it from the outside. If you want your external application to connect to Salesforce, you will need to register it as a connected app. When you register your application with Salesforce, you need to specify what kind of access your application needs. For example, is it allowed to make API calls? Salesforce will then generate an application identity value for you to use during authorization. Before we continue, let's discuss the concept of app. Salesforce uses this term, external app, for code running on a client device. The term app has three meanings in Salesforce. External app is an application running on a client device. That is what most mobile developers think of when they hear the term application. But we also have app, and this is a Salesforce app running inside Salesforce. And then we have the term connected app. And the Salesforce server-side part of an external application is what is termed as a connected app. It contains app identity values like the OAuth key, the secret, and access privileges like the OAuth scope. Since we now have an external application and we specify the OAuth scope in our connected app, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that Salesforce requires an external application to use OAuth for authorization. OAuth is industry standard, so many developers already know how to use it. In addition, OAuth can increase user confidence since the credentials are sent directly to Salesforce instead of being entered into an application. You'll see in Enterprise 302 that we're going to use the Xamarin Salesforce component, which will encrypt and cache a user's access token on the device to avoid the need to log in every time our user uses the external application. Salesforce supports the OAuth 1A flow and several flows from OAuth 2. However, the Xamarin Salesforce component only supports the OAuth 2 user agent flow. The user agent flow requires that the external application and the Salesforce server agree on two values, client key and callback URL. Both of these two values will be embedded in our external app. Once authenticated, we'll be able to allow a user to refresh his credentials without user interaction. Salesforce supports the OAuth 2 refresh token flow to get a new access token programmatically, so there will be no need for our user to re-log in, for example. Refresh requires the client key and client secret as part of the request. You also need to pass the refresh token that you got from the server as part of the initial login during the user agent flow. As we've now seen, we need three pieces of information to authorize against Salesforce. We need a client key, a client secret, and a callback URL. Salesforce generates the client key and the client secret for us. Our job is to copy them into our application and then send them to Salesforce during authorization. The last part, the callback URL, is for us to choose and specify and then also include in our application. We've talked about applications and we've talked about OAuth, but what is a connected application? You can think of an external app as having two parts, the client-side code that runs on the device and the server-side authorization information. Salesforce calls the server-side piece a connected app. When you create a connected app, Salesforce generates the client key and client secret. The key and secret are stored automatically inside the Salesforce authorization server, and you copy the key and secret into your external app and use them during the OAuth operations. For browser-based authorization, the callback URL is where the access token is delivered via browser redirect. When the authorization sequence is done outside of the browser, the callback URL does not need to be a real web link. The key thing is that the client and server agree on it, so the client can tell when the access token has been delivered. You are the owner of your Salesforce data. When you create a connected app, you are authorizing external code to access that data. The OAuth scopes you set determine what the external application is allowed to do. For example, access data or access profile information, or even allow the user to refresh a token. So how do we decide which scopes to include? Generally, allow the least access you can and still enable the external application to do its job. That way, if the app is compromised, the data will be limited. Luckily for us, creating connected applications is pretty straightforward inside Salesforce. Salesforce has a user-friendly page to create a connected application. Some of the required fields, for instance app name, API name, and contact email, will not be used by your external application. However, the most important steps in this process are entering your callback URL and specifying your OAuth scopes. After your connected app is created, the apps page in your Salesforce environment will list the client key and client secret. Note that the terminology changed from OAuth 1, which said consumer, to OAuth 2, which now uses client. So you'll be using a client key and a client secret instead of consumer key and consumer secret. We now have enough information to create a connected application. And I would like you to follow me back to our starter HTML file so we can have a look at our third and last exercise, creating a connected application. Let's have a look at our third and last exercise for this course. In this lab, we'll show you how to create a connected application inside your Salesforce environment. An app that accesses Salesforce data has two parts: the external app that runs on the client device and the connected app that exists on the Salesforce server. The connected application contains identity and permission information that Salesforce uses to decide whether to allow an external connection. This exercise shows you how to create a connected app inside Salesforce. You are welcome to go through this exercise on your own. However, I'm going to create this connected application as part of this exercise in the Salesforce environment. Once you're logged back into your Salesforce environment, make sure that you are on the setup page. If not on this page, select the setup option on the right-hand top menu level. This will bring you back to this page. Once here, we're going to make use of the category labeled build. From this category, we're going to select the create option. From the presented drop-down list, we're going to select apps. And once on the new page, we're going to create a new connected application by tapping on the new button. We're now able to add in the required information on this page. The first field is the connected application name. I'm going to call this connected application demo library. The next field to specify is the API name, and this will typically take the name of your connected application name and then replace all spaces with an underscore. You're welcome to call this whatever you like. Just keep in mind that it should be something descriptive that you can pick up from later on. We're then going to specify the contact email address. Now, this field is not used from your external application, but it is required. The next step is to specify our OAuth settings. And we do this by enabling the OAuth settings checkbox. We then need to specify a callback URL. Now, this callback URL is not required to be valid, and what I use is the following syntax: my app : / mobile SDK / detect / OAuth / done. Based on the FAQ available on the Salesforce website, this proves to be the best callback URL for external applications that are not web-based. The last step is to select the OAuth scopes we would like this connected application to expose. And we're going to select 3 items. We're going to select access and manage your data, access your basic information, and then perform requests on your behalf at any time. So access and manage your data is going to allow the API to expose data to be used. Then we're going to allow accessing your basic information, so that's allowing the user to log in. And then we're going to allow the perform requests on your behalf at any time. And this is going to allow the user to request a refresh token while using the application. So from internally in the Xamarin Salesforce component. At this point, we're going to click on Save. And continue. Now note that this may take 2 to 10 minutes for your changes to reflect on the server. Let's click on Continue. Notice that the information, the consumer key, is available as clear text. However, the consumer secret is not. At this point, you'll be able to copy both of these 2 values and save it for later use. Also note that your callback URL will be listed. We've now successfully created our first connected application, and all the information that we've noted will be used in Enterprise 302 when we create our first external application to connect to our connected app. We've now seen how to create a connected application to expose our Salesforce data to our external or mobile applications. We created a connected application and it gave us a client key, a client secret, and we had to remember to specify a callback URL. All of which is going to be needed to begin coding an external application. And with that, thank you very much for joining me in Enterprise 301, Salesforce Concepts and Architecture. We're now ready to sign up for Enterprise 302, where we're going to see how to manipulate all of these custom objects and fields that we've created in our mobile application using the Xamarin Salesforce component. So I would like you to sign up for that class if possible. And until then, best of luck with your projects and hope to see you soon. Take care and goodbye.